And now the faction that lent its name to the Riverfolk expansion for Root, the Riverfolk. We're going to go through the digital tutorial here on Legendary Tactics. And the Riverfolk are a really interesting faction. They're the economic faction, the wheelers and dealers, and their whole thing is basically to kind of lay low in many ways and to just trade, and it's a really interesting new faction that it comes with the Riverfolk expansion. And so we're going to zip through the tutorial here with you. The tutorial itself is actually a little bit shorter, I think, than the Lizard Cult, just because it's a little more straightforward in a way. You start by setting up 4 warriors in any clearings along the river, and the river is actually going to enter play as a potential route to move around. I know in my first games of Root, I always got confused with the rivers and mixing them up with the paths, but now you're actually going to get a chance to use them. So there are 3 services that the Riverfolk provide. The first is that river boats. So a faction that purchases that ability from the Riverfolk can treat the rivers as paths until the end of their turn. So that opens up the map in a really interesting way. I see it as a great way for the Airy to potentially fulfill their orders and make sure that they don't go into turmoil. The mercenaries, so you can also buy mercenaries, in which case Riverfolk warriors join in on a battle, and they take every other damage. So they don't take the first damage, but any even numbered damage. So the second and the fourth, 6th, 8th, whatever casualty would go to the Riverfolk instead of the faction that purchases them. So it gives them, the ability to use the Riverfolk to kind of absorb some damage, absorb some hits. And then finally, the hand of the Riverfolk is actually public knowledge, and the buyer can purchase any card from the Riverfolk's hand and add it to their hand. So in many ways, the Riverfolk kind of become this economic engine in the sense that they can speed up or slow down in some ways the growth of other factions in the game. So it's a really interesting thing. Now the payments, and we'll go over this, but the way that the Riverfolk take payments is each faction that buys one of their services takes warriors from their supply and puts it into their funds. So, and that's what the Riverfolk actually spend is other players' warriors in addition to their own. And one of my favorite mechanics, the one that's really interesting to me, is at during setup in each evening, the Riverfolk actually just set the price for their services. So in this case, we can choose, if you want to buy a card out of my hand, you got to pay 3 of your warriors from your supply. If you want to have riverboats, you got to pay 3. If you want me to take some damage for you and have some mercenaries, it's going to cost you 3 of warriors from your supply. And then that way, you can, as I said, the Riverfolk can kind of control the economy a little bit and potentially accelerate factions, give them the opportunity to accelerate their growth or hold things back and make it very expensive for them to benefit from the Riverfolk's abilities. So I just think it's so great that you just set your price based on the board situation. So I'd say the Riverfolk, there's a little bit of more advanced knowledge. You need to know the game pretty well to know how to set those prices properly given the situation. And sometimes the prices are going to be so steep that people aren't going to pay them, and that's fine. If you don't get any buyers, then they've got a mechanic for that. But each game starts with 3 payments represented by the warrior icons. They move into the funds area there, and with those funds, you can pay for moving, battling, drawing cards, and we'll show you how that works. So first of all, we're going to commit a fund to do a battle with the Marquise right now. And in this, it's important to realize that there's a difference between committing a fund and spending a fund. So committing it just moves it into the committed space. You get those funds back at the next turn. If you spend funds, you essentially return that warrior back to the appropriate supply. So some actions are going to be more expensive in that case, and we'll show you that in a sec. So we won the battle, but we got a recruit, and if you look, that the recruit has this little icon there with the at the bottom corner, and that means that that you're spending a fund. You're not committing a fund, and so the committed fund goes to back into the supply of whatever. Now in this case, it's our own warriors, but in the case of other players, it would go back into their supply. So recruiting is a little more expensive than the other ones, and also we don't get automatic card draw. We actually have to commit funds to drawing cards. And what we're going to do, we're going to lower our prices here and make it a little more palatable for people to, for the other players to benefit. And it looks like we have a customer. So the Marquise buys a card from our hand, which is great. And then the Marquise does what the Marquise does, and sort of roaming around and battling it out with the lizard cult, which is fine. Don't bother us. And the lizard cult gets an acolyte as revenge there. Now the lizard cult says, well, that riverboat's ability seems pretty attractive. So they bought the riverboat's ability, and now they can move along the rivers to have this battle with the Marquise, and they wipe them out. So that was worth the cost for them, and they're basically sacrificing some cards and doing all their rituals. And now it's back to our turn. Okay. So now we got a bunch of funds, which was great. So we got a variety of actions that we can use. Okay. Now, there are buildings, as the Riverfolk are, these things are called trade posts. And they are purchased by spending 2 funds matching the faction of a clearing that... whatever faction rules that clearing, we just need to spend 2 funds from that particular faction from our fund supply. So if we build right here, we're going to spend 2 Marquise, warriors as our purchase price. Now, if you'll notice, it has that same icon. So those funds go back to the Marquise supply. They do not go to our committed funds section. And we get 2 victory points every time we place a trade post. And trade posts let us craft, they give us dividends, which is a regular victory point reward. And it allows other players to buy more services from us. So we're going to demonstrate this by crafting a card. So we've got a trading post there. And so we're going to craft that card. We're going to commit fund to that one, and the cost of that was 1 rabbit, and that's where we have our trading post. So we're able to buy that or to craft that item, and we also, as Riverfolk, get to use rivers as paths, and we ignore the ruler restriction when moving through rivers as well. So we do have to commit funds to do that, but let's reinforce our trade post here. And we're going to really reinforce it. You don't want to lose trade posts. They cost you half your funds if you do. So we're going to make sure we keep this Marquise out of our trading post area, and take the opportunity to destroy a building and get a victory point as well. So that's good. Perfect. All right. We are in good shape. We're going to leave our costs alone for this turn. And the cat, Marquise de Cat, brings some forces back and for their field hospital, and they roam around and do what they do. So yeah, as a Riverfolk, I think the general idea is you just want to kind of integrate into the woods. You're not there to cause any trouble. You want to, as much as possible, make sales, and that's going to give you more options when it comes to your turn. So each enemy can buy 1 service from you per turn, plus for an additional service for each clearing with a trade post and one of their pieces. So that's the advantage of having trade posts in other areas. It means that they can buy 2, 3, 4 services if they wish. Now, the lizard cult bought our service as mercenary, so we take the even numbered hits. So this will be 1 casualty each for us on the attacker's side. So it can be handy if you have Riverfolk in the area to prevent you from taking too many casualties if you don't have a strong force, as well as the offensive potential. All right, and so back to our turn again. And we have a fair amount of funds, but as I said earlier, you don't want to lose a trade post. We lose half our funds rounded up. So let's make sure that the trade posts are well guarded. And we're going to spend a Riverfolk warrior back to the supply. Now, during our bird song, we score dividends as long as we have at least a trade post, 1 trade post on the map, and that's 1 dividend for every 2 funds that we didn't use on our previous turn. So if you see, we have 4 funds that are unused on the previous turn. So if we pass here, we get 2 victory points as a dividend, and so that's a great benefit. We'll keep our prices the same there. Why not? And the Marquise do what they do, and I think a few playthroughs with the Riverfolk. Again, every faction is so unique in Root. It's one of the great things about this game. How they balance a game like this, I have no idea. Must take a tremendous amount of play testing because each one is so different from each other, and so the asymmetry really of the game really shines here, and so that is good. So we'll. Yep, they're just showing their cards and doing their turn. I'm really interested to see as well how these 2 new factions interact with the original 4, and just see how everything fits together. Could make for a very interesting game. So the victory points we scored were for the unused funds, and because we didn't have any buyers, there was no payments, and so we get a minimum of 2 warriors from the supply as a consolation prize. So that gives us 6 funds to use this turn. And as it says here, the Riverfolk are innovative crafters. So instead of resolving the effect of a crafted card, we can add a warrior to our payments. So this is an alternative thing. If you spend or instead of kind of you craft the card, but you basically get a warrior in its place. So that is a good thing. So we're going to look to place another trade post here, and let's see what we can do. I think we need to buy another card here. Okay, that doesn't really help us. Okay, so we're going to establish a trade post, and we need to pick a quiet region. Actually, you know what? I think we are going to recruit a guy here first. I think this is what we're going to do. And we're going to build that trade post. That is... I guess because we didn't, we just came into ruling that clearing, we aren't able to build the trade post there right away. I'm tempted to hold off because I really don't want to, cause any. I don't want to necessarily spend all my funds, because I found in the games that I'd played with Flash beforehand, I found that it was kind of a challenge to keep the funds going, especially if you didn't have any customers. So maybe we'll draw another card here, and so we're going to just save the funds that we have. We're going to collect a dividend. We'll keep the prices the same. As I said, this is just the tutorial, and so there's lots to learn as far as how to play. So I've only been exploring this faction for the last couple days, so we're going to be learning a lot about how to play it. Flash is far more competent with the new factions than I am. But I think it's good to see the cards, the factions interact here as well. And I've got a fair amount of funds to make this work here. So this could be a really good thing. And again, with the tutorial, I'm not worried about losing the game, but I'm hoping to give you guys at least a good example of how to or how the mechanics work more than anything else. All right, so we had 2 unused funds, so that gives us a dividend, which is pretty cool. And because we're the ruler now, we can build a trade post there, which is great. That gives us a couple more victory points. And we reached one of our goals for the tutorial. And let's see, what do we want to do here? We want to, well, let's see, if we have 1, 2, 3, 4 unused funds. So can we, let's draw another card. And let's see. All right, interesting. Okay, so 2 fox clear. I don't think we can craft that card. If we have 1, 2, 3, 4, you know, I think I'm just gonna. It's not very exciting, but I'm going to basically just take the victory points for the dividend. Just we got a lot of funds there, and so we just need to get to 15 victory points. So, you know, maybe this and 1 battle will be enough to finish the job, so I can see a path to victory next turn, as long as nothing crazy happens. And we've got a heck of a lot of actions, so we can you know, recruit like crazy and make sure that we get a solid victory. And there's the lizard cult doing a conversion as well, which is, you know, one of their interesting abilities. Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see how everything interacts here. And especially because especially the lizard cult popping up anywhere on the board like this, it's it's pretty hard to keep them down. With the Marquise, you can kind of, you know, eat into their territory a little bit, but you know, with the lizard cult, I'm not sure how you can keep them down, to be honest. Okay, so we're going to we're going to recruit here. As I said, we're going to kind of dominate this whole thing here. And just for fun. And we're just going to battle here to win the day and beat the tutorial. Not that it was super hard, but unless we roll really ridiculously here. Yeah, there we go. So that gave us a bit more than we needed, but that's fine. That is perfect. And a clear victory for the Riverfolk. So anyway, hope you got a good sense of the mechanics behind them, and a little, you know, a sense of how they might play and how they might interact with the other factions. And of course, hope you got some value out of this video. And thank you so much for watching. If you could take a moment to like and subscribe down below, that'd be a huge help. And we look forward to seeing you here for more Root on Legendary Tactics.